वो हुसैन जिसके लिए नबी थे बता गए ये हदीस भी, ये है मुझसे मैं हूँ इसी से अबू, यही ज़ायरीन की बात
वाह 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 वाह,
है।
सुभान अल्लाह।
ये है मुझसे और मैं हूँ इसी से अबू, यही जाए। और वो जो हक के हक में खड़ा हुआ, वही बंदगी में बड़ा हुआ,
बेशक बेशक
यही
बेशक।
कर गए हैं हुसैन भी, यही मुरसलीन की बात है। वो जो हर दुआ का मुजीब है, वो जो शाहरग से करीब है, मैं हूँ मांगता बस उसी से अब, ये मुवहिदीन
बात
की
है।
बात
वाह
है।
वाह वाह वाह।
और जरा सार्कज़म है इस शेर में।
इरशाद।
वो थे मांगते जो बुतों से तब, वो है मांगते जो सभी से अब, वो तो मुशरिकीन की बात थी, ये तो मुस्लिमीन
ये की बात है।
की बात है। अब मसला है दरोग गोई तो जा बजा, न झिझक तू हाशिम बेनवा, तू कलाम इश्क में हक सुना, यही सालेहीन
की बात है।
की बात है।
सुभान अल्लाह सुभान अल्लाह
नजब सकी जो ना
सुभान अल्लाह सुभान अल्लाह।
छुप सकी, ओ इमाम दीन की बात।
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
आपकी इजाजत से
इरशाद इरशाद
नासिर जहाँ साहब का पढ़ा हुआ,
इरशाद इरशाद
मुजम्मा अफंदी साहब का लिखा हुआ एक कलाम के दो
इरशाद इरशाद।
सलाम सलाम भेजे।
अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद।
खुदा की राह में कार नुमाया,
ऐसे होते हैं।
ऐसे होते हैं तहे खंजर किए सजदे
ऐसे होते हैं।
मुसलमान, ऐसे होते हैं। और वो प्यारी प्यारी शक्लें देख कर आले पैगंबर की, सितारों ने कहा ऐ चांद इंसान,
ऐसे होते हैं।
ऐसे होते हैं। और जवानी रन से कहती आ रही है लाश कासिम पर, भाई जवानी रन से कहती आ रही है लाश कासिम पर, कि इस्लामी जवां मर्दों के अरमान
ऐसे होते हैं।
ऐसे होते। और मुसाफिर का तने बेसर है और शब का अंधेरा है, किसी की लाश पर गेसु परेशान, ऐसे होते। और कदम पर शह के दम निकला हबीब ने मज़ाहिर का, मोहब्बत के वफा के अहद पैमान, ऐसे होते हैं। और खुदा किसने क्या कहा होगा निगाहों से, सकीना को खबर क्या थी कि जिंदा ऐसे होते हैं। और सुना कर नज्म किस्सा करबला वाले शहीदों का, मुसलमानों को समझा दो मुसलमान ऐसे होते हैं। खुदा की राह में कारे नुमाया ऐसे होते हैं।
माशाअल्लाह। अच्छा भाई बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका, मौला आपको इज्जत दे, शोहरत दे, आपकी सारी ख्वाहिशें पूरी कर। मौला बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका आने का। बहुत बहुत सलवात भेजिए। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद। खुदा 2 मिनट बस यार, इंशाल्लाह। खुदा हाफिज, खुदा हाफिज, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। फातिहा। जब खुल्क से वक्त सफरे फातिमा आया, तब ज़ैनब व शब्बीर को पास अपने बुलाया। रोई बहुत बेटों को छाती से लगाया, ज़ैनब के दिया हाथ में हाथ और ये सुनाया, ए ज़ैनब बेकस मेरी दौलत से खबरदार, महबूबे इलाही की अमानत से खबरदार, महबूबे इलाही की अमानत से खबरदार। बेटी से ज़हरा ने बड़े दुख से है पाला, ये रूह मेरे जिस्म की है गेसुओं वाला, समझी से आँखों की ज़िया घर का उजाला, हर हुजरे से कभी गर्म हवा में ना निकाला। सोई हूँ तो पहले इसे छाती पे सुला कर, चक्की भी जो पीसी है तो गोदी में लिटा कर, चक्की भी जो पीसी है तो गोदी में लिटा कर। ए लाडली इस लाल का दुश्मन है ज़मां, हर शब्बीर को मेरी नज़रे बद से बचाना, तकलीफ भी सह लीजियो ईज़ा भी उठाना, अरे सदके गई मादर की वसीयत न भुलाना, और हर रंज में इस भाई के काम आई ओ ज़ैनब, जाए ये जिधर सा चली जाइयो ज़ैनब, जाए ये जिधर सा चली जाइयो ज़ैनब। जब खुल्क से वक्त सफरे फातिमा आया। बहुत बुलंद सलवात भेजें। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मोहम्मद। Now I'm requesting Qibla Talim Musfi Sahab for Majlis-E-Wafat Janab Khadija Salawatullah Alaiha. Ba'az Bilan Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please, before we begin, recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight's iftar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يوصينا معه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بهد الهمم ولا يناله غوث الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت محدود ولا أجل ممدود فترى الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالسخر ميدان عرض ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعن على أدائهم أجمعين من أول يوم ظلمهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المبين وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ووجدك عائلا فأغنى صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you're all aware, we are commemorating not just the wafat but the shahadat of Khadija al-Kubra salawatullah alaiha and Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa I use the word shahadat and not the word wafat. Why? Because there's a narration from the Masumin alayhi salam that state that anyone that passes away with the love of us in their heart, then they are considered to be a shaheed. Anyone that passes away with our love in their heart, then they are considered to be a shaheed. Is there anyone in Arabia at that time that loved the Holy Prophet more than Khadija al-Kubra? No. You'll find one or two other people. Lady Khadija salawatullah alaiha, Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. Of the people that lived there. Tonight we're commemorating the shahadat of Lady Khadija. There were a lot of al-Mu'mineen. There were a lot of al-Mu'mineen, but there's only one al-Masumeen. When it comes to the mother of Masumeen, can any of the other wives of the Holy Prophet claim to be that? No. Lady Khadija is the only one who can claim to be the mother of Masumeen from Amir al-Mu'mineen. You might think, what about Amir al-Mu'mineen? He's Masum. How is she mother of Amir al-Mu'mineen? He's Masum. How is she mother of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Inshallah, by the time we get to Imam Ali's days of Shahadat, we'll go. But when it comes to those days of Shahadat, we're going to go deeper into the wilayat of Amir al-Mu'mineen. We're not going to stick to just the Zahiri aspect of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I was here last year too, as you're all aware. We went into the Batini aspect, but we're going to go deeper into the Batini aspect. And this year, we're going to look at not my words, not the words of an alim, no, the words of an imam of how he described imamat. The words of an imam about how he described imamat. And these words are from none other than Ali himself. These words are none other than our 10th Imam, who describes Imamat in a ziyarat that if we don't read, then we haven't achieved anything. If you want to know, if you look at, for example, Sayyid Khomeini's life, there was a ziyarat that he used to read, and he himself, he says that because of the barakah of the ziyarat, I've achieved what I've achieved. All of the Urafa, if you look at the history of any of the Urafa in Shia Islam, they used to read the ziyarat either in the Haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen, or they used to read the ziyarat in their Salatul Layl. What ziyarat is this? Zat al-Jami Kabira. Zat al-Jami Kabira has nothing but the batini aspect of an imam. Imamat is being described by an imam. So when an imam describes an imam, then there's no room for someone to say that this person's ghali. Then put that same fatwa on the imam. Inshallah, when we get to the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen. But today we're speaking about Lady Khadija, of how a wife should be, of how a Muslim should be, of how a Muslim woman should act within Islam. When you look at the life of Lady Khadija, what ends up happening is that the scholars, the speakers, they speak to the women. Why? Because they say that this is how Lady Khadija was, this is how women should be. But when you look at the life of Lady Khadija, there are aspects that we as men can also incorporate in our lives. What do I mean? Lady Khadija is known to be what? A businesswoman. To this day, she's known to be the greatest businesswoman in all of Arabia, to the point where she was known as Malikatul Arab. Not just Malikatul Hijaz, but Malikatul Arab, the princess of all of Arab. Do you all know, when it came to Lady Khadija and her business acumen, they say that 70,000 camels, her mal, her wealth, her trade would be brought on up to 70,000 camels. 70,000 camels. And maybe you might be thinking 70,000 camels, say, you know, you're exaggerating. No. No one's saying that those 70,000 camels were in one specific place at the same time. No. Her trade caravan, the narrations state that her trade caravan itself, whatever the Quraysh had that they were sending, that would just be her trade caravan. Meaning what? Meaning if the Quraysh were sending 100 camels, then just her trade caravan would equal 100 camels. Just her trade caravan. And where would these go? They'd either go to Sham or they'd go to Yemen. From there, everything else would spread. When they went to Sham, from Sham, they'd get stuff that would come from Europe. Sham would be where the center of European trade would be. They'd come to Europe. From Europe, they'd come to Sham. From Sham, then they'd come to Mecca. From Mecca, they'd go to Yemen. From Yemen, then they'd go cross the sea. This was the trade of Lady Khadija. This is how she would trade. This is how she would trade. But at the same time, we have business people in our religion. We have business people in our school of thought. She would never cheat anyone when it came to trading. She would never cheat. And I'm sorry to say, but when it comes to the Islamic countries, that's where the most amount of cheating happens when it comes to business. That's how it is. You go to India, you go to Pakistan, you go to any of these countries, the most amount of cheat that happens where? In Islamic countries. Why is that? Islam tells you not to cheat, Muslims are cheating. Islam tells you not to lie, Muslims are lying. Islam tells you not to kill, Muslims are killing. Everything that Islam tells Muslims not to do, Muslims are doing. Why is that? What caused this to happen? If all of the Muslims took Ali ibn Abi Talib as their leader, who followed these laws of Islam, then none of this would happen. When you have a leader that steals, then it's okay for you to steal. When you follow a leader that kills, then it's okay for you to kill. When you follow a leader that cheats, then it's okay for you to cheat. When you have a leader that engages in all of these types of activities that Islam forbids, then you'll see that these individuals will also engage in this activity. Why? They'll say, our leader did this. And now, the Sunni school of thought is coming into a lot of trouble because of some of the actions of some of their khalifas that they were engaged in. Inshallah, when we have group meetings, we'll talk about some of those actions. But why is it that the Muslims are engaged in all of these acts, all of these actions that Islam has forbidden? It's because they did not hold on to what was the most important. When the Holy Prophet left this world, or before he left this world, he says, I'm leaving behind you two weighty things: the Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Hold on to them. Why? Because they will not separate until when? They meet me in Kawthar. They meet me at the pond. What have they done? They've separated. When they separated the two, the people that took the helm of religion, the people that took the helm of politics, they were those people that were never even supposed to hold any of those titles. And because these people took those titles, you see personalities such as Lady Khadija, her status come down. You see personalities such as Hazrat Abu Talib, their status come down. You see personalities such as Amir al-Mu'mineen, his status come down. Why? Because you had these types of individuals. Salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When it comes to Lady Khadija, she is related to the Holy Prophet 2 generations back. The Holy Prophet's great-grandfather and Lady Khadija's great-grandfather, they come from the same line, correct? When it comes to Lady Khadija, the narrations that we have in Sunni Islam, they say that this is the problem that we have here. They say that Lady Khadija, how old was she when she got married to the Holy Prophet? How old? 28, we'll get to this 28. But the general masses, what do they know of her age to be when she married the Holy Prophet? 40, thank you so much. They say that she was 40 years old when she married the Holy Prophet. At the same time, they say that she was widowed. At the same time, they say that she had children from previous husbands, previous marriages, correct? At the same time, they say that when she wanted to get married, people from all over Arabia would send proposals. But what would she do? She would reject them. She would reject them. Does that make any sense? Someone who's widowed, someone who's 40 years old, all of these proposals are coming to her, but she's rejecting them? She's 40. How much longer does she expect to live now? Usually when you're that age, if proposals are coming left and right, what are you going to do? You're going to look at those proposals and you're going to accept. Why? Because you know what your age is. The fact that all of these proposals were coming to Lady Khadija itself tells us that she was not 40 years old. It tells us that she was young. And this is what our narrations state. This is what Murtaza Askari in his book, he stated that she was not 40 years old. This is what Banu Umayyah did when they came into power. Why? Because they know the age of some of the wives of the Holy Prophet. One of them, who's become famous as Ummul Mu'mineen. The other wives are not Ummul Mu'mineen, no. The one that's become famous as Ummul Mu'mineen. The narrations do state that she was married before. The narrations do state that she was divorced. The narrations state that she had children. What did they do? They applied that to Lady Khadija. If you look at the Quran, when the Quran, it threatens the wives of the Holy Prophet, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? If you don't straighten out, what will we do? We'll give him better wives. If the wives that the Holy Prophet had at that time were the best of wives, then why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that we will give better wives? Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that if they're the best, then there can't be better? Just logically speaking, if they're the best, then there cannot be better. But the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we will give better wives tells you what? That they were not the best. And it's not necessary for the wives of the Holy Prophet to be the best. In what sense? Hazrat Nuh's wife, was she the best? No, she wasn't. What happened to Hazrat Nuh's wife? She was also captured in the azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happened to the wife of Hazrat Lut? Was she the best just because she's the wife of the Holy Prophet? No. What happened to her? She was also captured in the azab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just because you're related to the Holy Prophet through a contract does not mean that you're the best for him. It's just a contract. If that contract gets torn, or if that contract, the Holy Prophet was to say, I divorce you, what happens to her? That contract is over, that relationship is over. The relationship between the Holy Prophet and the wives of the Holy Prophet is only and only due because of the contract. Once that contract of marriage is done, that relationship ceases to exist. That relationship ceases to exist. But none of those wives had children. There was only one wife that had children from the Holy Prophet. One child that survived. And that was through Lady Khadija. Until the end of time, the progeny of the last prophet is going through Lady Khadija sallallahu alaiha. Yet 1400 years later, the Muslims have not given due respect for her. The Muslims have not. When she would get her wealth, what did she used to do with that? Do you all know? And compare that to what we do. Compare that. When Lady Khadija would get her wealth, she would look in the community to see, is there any girl that wants to be wed? Is there any girl that wants to get married? If there is, she would find that person and she would pay the dowry. She'd pay. She'd look at the poor in the community. She'd feed them. She'd look at people. What would she do? What would her and her brother do? At that time, as you're all aware, in Saudi Arabia, they would bury girls alive. Not all of them. Not all the tribes. This is a misconception that people think that everyone in Saudi Arabia would bury no, it's not everyone in Saudi Arabia. No, there were certain tribes and there were certain people for certain reasons. For example, if they were too poor and they could not afford to keep a child, what would they do? They'd bury the girl. 1. 2, at that time in Saudi Arabia, boys were looked up to. Why? Because they knew that if something would happen, the boy would grow up and they would look after the family. It's not so distant that we had some countries, especially countries like China. What would they do? They had a law where you could only have 2 offspring. That's it. And if those 2 offspring were not boys, what would they do? The women, they would abort. If they found out that it wasn't a boy, they'd abort the baby. Why? Because they didn't want girls. Until they recently, I believe it's been about 10 years since they took back that law. But in that time in Saudi Arabia, what would they do? They'd bury the girl alive. Why? Because 1, they could not sustain her. 2, they knew that if something was to happen to their tribe, then what would happen to the girls? They would be captured and they would become slaves. The girls would not be their own. And because of that, some of these people, they buried girls alive. What would Lady Khadija and her brother do? Or her cousin? They would go find these people that are going to bury these girls alive and they'd say, we'll take care of them. We'll take care of them. If you want to look at someone who opened up an orphanage without calling it orphanage, you look at Lady Khadija. Today, when someone even donates to an orphanage, what do? They plaster it everywhere. On social media, they plaster it everywhere. I donated this much. No. If you're going to give, you give with your right hand and not even let your left hand know that you're giving. That's Islam. That's Islam. Lady Khadija did not even want a thank you for everything she did. Not even thank you. Why? Because even before accepting the shahadat of the Holy Prophet, even before accepting the nabuwat of the Holy Prophet, her and her family, they were following whose sunnat? Sunnat Ibrahimi. They were known as Hanifs. Those people in Arabia that were following the sunnat of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, they were known as Hanifs. Lady Khadija was one of them. Most of the Banu Hashim were Hanifs. The tribe that Lady Khadija came from, the Asad tribe, they were Hanifs. But the other tribes, they were polytheists. They were the ones that were mushrikeen. When you hear mushrikeen of Makkah, no, not all of them were mushrikeen. They were also monotheists. there, especially Banu Hashim, especially Banu Asad. These two tribes specifically, they were monotheists. Yes, you had one or two polytheists within the tribe, but the majority of the tribe was monotheist. Lady Khadija sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Salamun ala Ibrahim, Salamun ala Nuh, Salamun ala Ilyasin, Salamun ala Awwaleen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending his salam to who? Nuh alayhi salam is a prophet. Ibrahim alayhi salam is a prophet. Salihin. If you look at the interpretation of the Quran, most of the interpretations, they said that by Salihin, it means prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hazrat Ibrahim a prophet, Hazrat Nuh a prophet. All of these are prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doing? Sending salam on them. Correct? One woman that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends his salam on is Lady Khadija sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send salam? What does that mean? When you read Ayatul Durud and you say those phrases, and when you say taslima, send durud on them, a complete durud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels, correct? What does it mean that alaykum salam wa rahmatullah? What does it mean when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing it? Ayatul Durud. Which one is Ayatul Durud? Anyone? Thank you. No, Ayatul Durud. Inna Allahu wa malaikatuhu. Thank you so much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the malaika are sending durud. What does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send durud? What does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yusallun alayh? What does it mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do this? When we send it, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah does it, it's not that he's asking. Who's he going to ask? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he descends that salam. When we say salam alaikum, we're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for peace upon you. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's not asking anyone. He himself, he's descending that salam on an individual. Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam, he comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Holy Prophet asked Jibreel, what is it? The first thing Jibreel says is, Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me to tell you to send salam on Khadija. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends his salam on Khadija. Tell her that. The Holy Prophet, he goes back and he says to Lady Khadija, Oh Khadija, Jibreel had come to me and he told me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending salam to you. And what does Lady Khadija reply? She says, As-salam, meaning the salam sent his salam through his servant to me. What is salam? Salam itself is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what is Lady Khadija saying? She's thanking for that salam. There've only been prophets in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent his salam on. Salamun ala Nuh, Salamun ala Ibrahim, Salamun ala Ilyasin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending his salam on prophets. But now you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending salam on one of the wives of the Holy Prophet. Can you tell me which other wife Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent salam on? No. Why is it that this was the only wife? When Nabuwat lasted, 13 years after she passed away? Nabuwat lasted 14 years after she passed away. In those 14 years, there was no other wife that deserved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send salam on? What does this tell you about the difference between Lady Khadija and all the other wives of the Holy Prophet? Think about that. We as Muslims, not just Shias, this is for Muslims. We need to figure out which personalities in history we want to try to emulate. We need to figure out who we're going to emulate, not just grab anyone and everyone that existed in history and say, you know what, I'm going to try to be like them. No, even today, apply this today. Apply this today. You don't just look at anyone and say, I'm going to try to emulate them. No. See what kind of character this person has, so you can emulate their character. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Those traits that Lady Khadija had, those aren't traits just for women to follow. Those are traits for every Muslim to follow. What did Lady Khadija do? The mal that was brought. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this verse that I started this lecture off with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say to the Holy Prophet? Did we not find you poor and we made you rich? We found you to be poor and we enriched you. We made you rich. Tell me, how did the Holy Prophet become rich? Was it not through the wealth of Lady Khadija? And look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in this verse. He's basically saying that the wealth of Lady Khadija is my wealth. I'm the one who enriched you, but the wealth is Lady Khadija's. How was that? After they got married, Lady Khadija, she told the Holy Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, my business, my wealth, everything is at your feet. Everything is at your feet. And the narrations, they said when they brought the wealth of Lady Khadija, they put it in front, she put it in front of the Holy Prophet. And they say that it was so big, it basically became a wall. One person on one side could not see another person on the other side. That's how much wealth Lady Khadija had. That's how much wealth Lady Khadija gave to the Holy Prophet. This was the life of Lady Khadija. The way she lived, she did not live her life for herself. She lived her life for the Holy Prophet. She lived her life for the Holy Prophet, not herself. Everyone needs to understand this concept. All of us were living our life for ourselves. But if we change this mentality and we say, no, this life that we want to live for the Imam of our time. The Imam of our time. Then we can become his companions. Then we can become his soldiers. Then we can become those people that the Imam is waiting for. But this mentality needs to change. The breathing that I do is not for myself, it's for the sake of the Imam. The eating that I do is not for myself, it'll be for the Imam. The work that I do is not for myself, it'll be for the Imam. Everything from the time that you wake up to the time that you go back to sleep, if you do it for the sake of the Imam will definitely help you. The Imam will help you. This is what Lady Khadija did. Lady Khadija, she would go when the Holy Prophet, when he would go to the cave for meditation, Lady Khadija, she would go to the Holy Prophet to bring him food. And if anyone that's gone to Hajj or Umrah, the cave where the Holy Prophet, he used to meditate in, you all know how steep that hill is. You all know how steep that hill is. This is how much love Lady Khadija had for the Holy Prophet. She'd go there herself and she'd give that food. Some narrations, they said that Amir al-Mu'mineen would be outside of the cave. And she'd give it to Amir al-Mu'mineen and she'd come back. This is how much love she had for the Holy Prophet. And yet the Muslims have forgotten her. For 3 years, it was her wealth that was feeding them when they were in Shib Abu Talib. It was her wealth that was feeding them. Where were those companions that now were so wealthy? Where were all of they? This is the injustice that's been done to her. And you look at the Muslims today, there's only one wife or two wives that they want to talk about. As one of the Sunni scholars themselves, they said, the Holy Prophet only had one wife that he loved. The others, what were they? They were just political marriages. They were political marriages. It's not a Shia. No, it's a Sunni scholar that came on TV and he said that there's only one real wife of the Holy Prophet, that's Khadija, Lady Khadija. The others were all just political marriages. And yes, if you look at the history and you put it into context, they were political marriages. And how do you know that it was only Lady Khadija that the Holy Prophet loved? Because even in Medina, when he would hear the voice of her sister, he would think that it is Lady Khadija. In Medina, when he heard the voice of Lady Khadija's sister, he thought that it was Lady Khadija, but then it turned out to be her sister. When he realized that it's her sister, he started to cry. When he started to cry, one of the wives of the Holy Prophet who was sitting next to him, she says to him, "Why do you cry over an old woman? Why do you cry over an old woman when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you better women?" This is the akhlaq of a wife of the Holy Prophet. Why do you cry over an old woman when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a better woman? Did the Holy Prophet stay quiet? No. He says, "What are you talking about? Which one of my wives is better than Khadija?" If she was truly better than Khadija, then she would have opened her mouth and said, "I'm better than Khadija," but she doesn't. The fact that she stays silent tells you what? That she wasn't better than Khadija. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I'm going to give you better wives, tells you what? That she wasn't better than Khadija. Inshallah, we'll talk about this in detail a little bit later. But this injustice that happened to Lady Khadija. Do you all know? I said in the beginning that her mal, her wealth was brought on 70,000 camels. That woman, that personality whose wealth was brought on 70,000 camels, when she's leaving this world, she doesn't even have a kafan for herself. She doesn't even have a shroud for herself. What does she say? She didn't have the means to tell the Holy Prophet. What does she do? She has a daughter that's about 4 or 5 years old. She calls that daughter and she tells her, "Oh my daughter, can you tell the Holy Prophet that I don't have a kafan? What I want is the shirt that he used to wear for his prayer. I want his shirt to be my kafan." Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah. Sallallahu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Sallallahu alayki ya Siddiqatu Fatima. Sallallahu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Sallallahu alayka ya Gharib al-Ghuraba. Ya Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Brothers and sisters, when Lady Khadija tells Lady Fatima that, "Oh my daughter, please tell your father that I don't have a kafan. Please tell him that I want him to use his shirt, I want him to use his libas, I want him to use his clothes as my kafan." Lady Fatima, she goes to the Holy Prophet and she tells him, "Oh father dear, my mother is saying that she doesn't have a kafan and she wants you to use your shirt as her kafan." The Holy Prophet, he comes to Lady Khadija and he starts to cry. When he starts to cry, Lady Khadija, she tells Holy Prophet, "Ya Rasulullah, I have just 2 wishes." And he says, "Ya Khadija, you never asked me for anything. Everything you had, you gave to me. What are your 2 wishes? What can I do for you now?" And when he says that, she says, "Oh Rasulullah, my first wish is that I have your shirt as a kafan." And he says, "I'll give you my shirt as a kafan. What is your second wish?" And she looks at Lady Zahra. She points towards her and she starts to cry. She says, "Ya Rasulullah, this is the only daughter that I have. I've never seen her cry. Please take good care of her and make sure that she never cries in my absence." Brothers and sisters, what happens? The Holy Prophet, he himself, he shrews, he gives his shirt to Lady Khadija. He himself, he puts her in the qabr. Before he puts her in the qabr, what does he do? He comes down into it and he tells the qabr, "Oh qabr, you have to know that this is my wife, this is Khadija that is coming in here. This is the mother Fatima to Zahra that is coming in here." He comes out, he puts Lady Khadija in, Lady Fatima, she starts to cry. Why? Because she misses her mother. How old is Lady Fatima? The narration says that she's 4 or 5 years old. But Ya Zahra, you were able to cry over your mother. Come look at Karbala where Sakina, she's not able to cry over her father. Come look at Karbala where Lady Sakina, when she starts to cry and she calls out for her father, she gets slapped in the face. Come look at Karbala when the tents have been burned. Oh Zahra, come look at Karbala with Sakina. She's running towards Najaf asking for her grandfather. Ya Fatima, come to Karbala when Amir al-Mu'mineen is holding Lady Sakina and asking her where she is going. And she replies, I'm going to Najaf to meet my grandfather, Amir al-Mu'mineen. He puts her down. When he puts her down, Lady Zainab, she comes and she says, oh sir, thank you for finding this daughter. She was the most beloved daughter of Hussein. Thank you for finding her. Can you give her back to me? Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he puts Lady Sakina down, he looked at her and she says one thing. He says Zainab. When he says Zainab, Lady Zainab, she turns around and she says, oh sir, how do you know who I am? That's when he says for the second time, oh my daughter Zainab. When he says, oh my daughter Zainab, she starts to cry. She says, oh father dear, now you have come. Oh father dear, when Hussein was being martyred, I called you, but you did not come. When Abbas was being martyred, I called you, but you did not come. It's now that you've come. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Wal-la'natullah ala qawm al-kazibin. Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya Hussein.
बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने पे पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने दे सामने तेरी सनद दे टुकड़े सुन दी रही नाल सुन दी रही गल्ला तेरी तहरीर दे बारे मेंबर दे सामने मैं रोंदी रही ओ हंसदे रहे जिन्हां लोकां नूं तू कलमे पढ़ाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए मेंबर दे सामने तेरी सनद दे टुकड़े सुन दी रही नाल सुन दी रही गल्लां तेरी तहरीर दे बारे मेंबर दे सामने मैं रोंदी रही ओ हंसदे रहे जिन्हां लोकां नूं तू कलमे पढ़ाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए मैं दसनी हाँ तेरे बाजो तेरी ज़हरा ने जो ज़ुल्म उठाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हक लैण गई सां ज़ालिम दियां झिड़कां ढलदी रही हथ मलदी रही रोके खड़ी दरबार बिछाले हाय हक लैण गई सां मैं उजड़ी नूं ना हक मिलिया कोई मैं वांगू दरबार न जाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए मैं दसनी हाँ तेरे बाजो तेरी ज़हरा ने जो ज़ुल्म उठाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोण ते पहरे लाए शबीर नू कीता ज़ैनब दे हवाले अमड़ी ने करके प्यार अखीरी नीकू गल नाल चलाया हाय शबीर नू कीता नल कहंदी रही संग छोड़ी ना मेरे बछड़े थे कोई बात भी आए हाय बाबा बछड़ी दी बाबा मैं हजारा लाडली पाक नबी दी मेरे घर नो ना जलाओ पहचान भी भूल गई तेरा नाम लेके बाबा साई उन लोकांगे मैं वास्ते पाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने ते पहरे लाए मैं दसनी हाँ तेरे बाजो तेरी ज़हरा ने जो जुल्म उठाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने ते पहरे लाए हाय बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे रोने ते पहरे लाए मेंबर दे सामने तेरी सनद दे टुकड़े सुनदी रही नाल सुनदी रही गल्लां तेरी तहरीर दे बारे हाय मेंबर दे सामने मैं रोंदी रही ओ हसदे जिन्हां लोकां नूं तू कल में पढ़ाए हाय बाबा मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
मुतवज्जह ज़ियारत
अस्सलामु अलैका या रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या अमीर अल-मोमिनीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या सिद्दीक़तु फ़ातिमा ज़हरा सय्यदतुन निसाइल आलमीन, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या हसन अल-मुज्तबा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या गरीब अल-ग़ुरबा या अबा अब्दुल्लाह, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना अली इब्न अल-हुसैन, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या मोहम्मद इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या जाफ़र इब्न मोहम्मद, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या मूसा इब्न जाफ़र, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना अली इब्न मूसा, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या मोहम्मद इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना अली इब्न मोहम्मद, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना हसन इब्न अली, अस्सलामु अलैका या मौलाना या साहिबुल असर ज़मान, अलमान 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 मिनल फितनिज़ ज़मान, अज्जलल्लाहु तआला फरजक व ज़ुहूरक व जअलना मिन अंसारिक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।
Request everyone, Qibla